She turned to face the man she'd married when he drove a beat-up Honda and lived on instant noodles. Back then, his eyes would light up when she wore this exact dress. He'd said it made her look like starlight against midnight sky. Now those same eyes looked at her with something that made her stomach twist: embarrassment. Tonight, we witness what happens when a woman's quiet strength meets a man's loud arrogance. But who really held the power in that glittering ballroom? The mogul, the mistress, or the wife? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The billionaire's wife stood in the ballroom doorway while cameras flashed, but she wasn't the woman everyone expected to see. Hours earlier, her husband had chosen his mistress over her in front of Miami's elite. What he didn't know was that his affair wasn't just about lust. It was about revenge, and his empire was about to crumble. Have you ever been publicly humiliated by someone who promised to love you? Have you watched someone you trusted choose someone else right in front of you? Tonight, we witness what happens when a woman's quiet strength meets a man's loud arrogance. But who really held the power in that glittering ballroom? The mogul, the mistress, or the wife? Stay with me as we uncover a night that changed everything for America's most powerful couple. Now, let me take you back to where this devastating evening truly began. She chose the thrift store dress because it reminded her of who they used to be, before money made him forget her worth. Monica Hale stood in their penthouse closet, running her fingers along row after row of designer gowns. Valentino, Versace, Armani, each one worth more than her childhood home in Atlanta. But tonight, for the Miami Children's Hospital Charity Gala, she reached past all of them for a simple navy dress she'd bought at a consignment shop 15 years ago. "You're wearing that?" Richard's voice cut through the silence like ice. He stood in the doorway, adjusting diamond cufflinks that cost more than most people made in a year. "Monica, do you realize we'll be there tonight?" She turned to face the man she'd married when he drove a beat-up Honda and lived on instant noodles. Back then, his eyes would light up when she wore this exact dress. He'd said it made her look like starlight against midnight sky. Now, those same eyes looked at her with something that made her stomach twist: embarrassment. "I realize exactly who will be there," she said quietly, smoothing the dress's soft fabric. "The same people who wouldn't return our calls when you were building your first hotel and we needed investors." Richard's jaw tightened. He walked to his own closet, pulling on a jacket that probably cost more than their first apartment's rent. "That was different. We were different then." "No, Richard, you were different then. I'm still the same woman who believed in you when nobody else would." The memory hit her like a physical blow. Their first night in this very penthouse, when he'd carried her across the threshold and made love to her on the marble floor because they didn't have furniture yet. His hands had worshipped every inch of her body, whispering how she was his good luck charm, his anchor, his everything. When was the last time he'd touched her like that? When was the last time he'd touched her at all? "The car will be here in 10 minutes, he said without looking at her. "Please tell me you at least have appropriate jewelry." Monica reached for her grandmother's pearl necklace, the only valuable thing her family had ever owned. "Will this do? Or should I borrow something from your mother's collection?" He finally looked at her then, and for just a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of the man who used to love her authenticity. But it disappeared so quickly she might have imagined it. "That's fine," he said, his tone suggesting it was anything but fine. "Just try to fit in tonight, okay? This is important for the business." Everything was about the business now. When had she stopped being his wife and become just another asset to manage? Have you ever felt ashamed of who you are because someone made you feel small? Tell me in the comments. As the car pulled up to the gala, Richard's phone buzzed with a text from someone named a message that made his jaw clench and his wife's evening about to become a nightmare. Every marriage has secrets, but some secrets have perfectly manicured nails and a taste for expensive champagne. The Fontainebleau Hotel ballroom glittered like something from a fairy tale, but Monica knew better than to believe in happy endings anymore. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across marble floors where Miami's wealthiest mingled, their laughter sharp as broken glass. She watched Richard work the room, his charm turned on full blast for everyone except her. That's when she saw her. Vanessa Chun moved through the crowd like she owned it, which, given the diamond necklace dripping down her throat, she might as well have. Every man's eyes followed her red silk dress as it hugged curves that had clearly never seen a day of real work. She was everything Monica wasn't: young, polished, and hungry for the kind of life money could buy. Monica's breath caught when Richard's face lit up at the sight of her. Not the polite smile he wore for business contacts, but something raw and wanting that Monica remembered from their early days. Something he hadn't shown her in years. 3 months ago, Monica had suspected. The late nights at the office, the phone calls he took in private, the way he flinched when she touched him. But seeing them together, watching Vanessa place her hand on his arm with practiced intimacy, made it real in a way that nearly brought her to her knees. She remembered their first encounter, which she'd witnessed from the hotel security footage she'd requested. Richard had been leaving a business dinner when Vanessa's car accidentally broke down in the parking garage. She'd approached him in a dress that left little to imagination, asking for help with her engine troubles. By the time he called a tow truck, she'd already gotten his number. Their affair had started like a cliché: stolen hours in expensive hotel rooms, whispered promises about leaving their respective lives. Monica knew because she'd hired a private investigator after finding lipstick on Richard's collar that wasn't her shade. "Mrs. Hale, you look lovely tonight." The voice belonged to Marcus Webb, Richard's business partner and one of the few people who still treated her like she mattered. "Thank you, Marcus. At least someone thinks so." His eyes followed her gaze to where Richard and Vanessa stood by the bar, their heads bent together in intimate conversation. "Monica, don't." She raised her hand, her voice steady despite the earthquake in her chest. "I already know." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "What are you going to do?" Monica watched as Richard's thumb traced across Vanessa's wrist, the same gesture he used to make when they were falling in love. "I'm going to survive this. I always do." But survival and living were two different things entirely. What drives someone to risk everything for forbidden desire? Share your thoughts below. Monica spotted them across the room, her husband's hand lingering on another woman's waist, but her smile never faltered. She had learned something devastating about Vanessa that would change the game entirely. In front of 500 guests and a dozen cameras, he chose to break her heart in the most public way possible. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone, calling for attention as dinner was served. Monica found herself seated at the head table, a position that should have honored her as Richard's wife, but instead felt like a front-row seat to her own destruction. Richard sat 2 seats away from her, with Vanessa positioned directly across from him. Every smile they shared, every meaningful glance, was captured by the photographers circling their table like vultures. Monica felt the eyes of Miami's elite watching, waiting to see how the scorned wife would handle her husband's public affair. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC announced, "please welcome our evening's biggest benefactor, Richard Hale." Applause filled the ballroom as Richard stood, straightening his tie with the confidence of a man who believed his money could buy him anything, including absolution for his sins. Monica clapped along, each strike of her palms together echoing like gunshots in her ears. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Richard began, his voice carrying across the room with practiced ease. "Children's health care is close to my heart, and I'm honored to support this vital cause." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd before landing on Monica. For a moment, she thought he might acknowledge her, might remember that she was the one who'd suggested this charity in the first place, having grown up in a neighborhood where kids went without basic medical care. Instead, his gaze shifted to Vanessa. "I'd especially like to thank someone who's brought new perspective to my life," he continued, and Monica felt the blood drain from her face. "Vanessa Chun, my consultant, has helped me understand the importance of fresh approaches to old problems." The word consultant dripped with insinuation. Around their table, guests exchanged knowing looks while cameras clicked frantically. Monica remembered their wedding night, when Richard had promised to honor her in front of God and everyone. Now he was dishonoring her in front of everyone except God, though she wasn't sure God was watching anymore. Vanessa stood gracefully, accepting the applause like she deserved it. She wore confidence like perfume, strong enough to fill the room. When she blew Richard a kiss, subtle enough to look professional, but intimate enough to make its meaning clear, Monica felt something inside her break. Not her heart, that had been cracking for months. No, this was deeper. This was the sound of her tolerance finally reaching its limit. The cameras loved it all. Tomorrow's gossip pages would feast on this moment, dissecting every angle of the billionaire's public affair while his wife sat frozen at the same table. Monica could already see the headlines. Hale's new love, or billionaire's wife replaced? She thought about their honeymoon in Paris, when Richard had made love to her in their hotel room overlooking the Seine. He'd whispered that she was his forever, that no amount of success would ever change how much he needed her. The man who'd said those words felt like a stranger now. Have you witnessed someone you loved transform into someone you didn't recognize? Drop a heart if this hits close to home. As Richard led Vanessa to the dance floor, Monica received a phone call that made her blood run cold. And suddenly, her husband's betrayal became the least of her problems. Some phone calls change your evening. Others change your entire life and the lives of everyone around you. Monica's phone vibrated against her clutch just as Richard spun Vanessa across the dance floor to The Way You Look Tonight. The irony wasn't lost on her. He'd danced to that same song at their wedding, promising to look at her that way forever. The caller ID showed James Morrison, Richard's longtime lawyer, and one of the few people who had her personal number for emergencies only. Her hands trembled as she accepted the call, stepping away from the table toward the ballroom's French doors. "Monica, thank God you answered." James's voice cracked with urgency. "Where's Richard? I've been trying to reach him for the past hour." "He's busy," she said, watching her husband dip Vanessa low enough that her red dress pooled like blood on the marble floor. "What's wrong?" "I just got word from our contact at the FBI. They're opening an investigation into the Miami Beach development project. Something about irregularities in the permit process and possible bribes to city officials." The champagne in Monica's stomach turned to acid. She'd helped Richard research that project, had even suggested some of the community outreach programs that made it more palatable to local residents. If there was corruption involved. "That's impossible," she whispered, stepping onto the moonlit terrace where the ocean breeze carried the scent of jasmine and impending disaster. "Richard runs a clean business." "Monica," James's voice gentled, the way it did when he had to deliver bad news about quarterly earnings or failed deals. "There are bank records, offshore accounts, payments to officials who fast-track the environmental permits. Someone's been very sloppy or very desperate." She remembered Richard's stress over the past few months, the way he'd snap at her over minor things, the increasing late nights at the office. She'd attributed it to the affair. But what if it was something worse? "How bad is it?" she asked, gripping the terrace railing until her knuckles went white. "Bad enough that they're freezing assets tomorrow morning. Bad enough that everything you've built together could disappear overnight." Monica's mind raced through the implications. Their hotels, their investments, their charitable foundation, everything tied to Richard's name would be caught in the web, including her own accounts, since they'd never bothered to separate their finances after marriage. The memory hit her suddenly, Richard confessing his fears to her just last month during one of their rare intimate moments. He'd been inside her, moving slowly, whispering against her neck about feeling trapped, about pressure from investors who wanted results no matter the cost. She'd thought he meant business pressure. Now she wondered if he'd been trying to tell her something else entirely. "James, what aren't you telling me?" A pause that lasted too long. "There's more. Monica, the investigation isn't just about bribes. They think Richard's been laundering money through his hotels for some very dangerous people. The kind who don't accept failure as an option." Through the ballroom windows, she could see Richard laughing at something Vanessa whispered in his ear. He looked so carefree, so untouchable. If only he knew that his carefully constructed world was about to crumble. When someone betrays you publicly, do you protect them privately? What would you do? The caller's words echoed in her mind. The FBI is asking questions about the Miami project. As she turned to find Richard, she saw him kissing Vanessa, and realized her husband had no idea his world was about to explode. The woman stealing her husband wasn't just after his heart. She was after his empire, and she had the keys to destroy it. Monica stood frozen on the terrace, watching Richard and Vanessa through the ballroom windows while James's warning echoed in her mind. Money laundering, dangerous people, FBI investigation. The pieces of her life were rearranging themselves into a picture she didn't recognize. But as she watched Vanessa work the room after their dance, something clicked into place. The way she'd appeared exactly when Richard's business trouble started. The way she seemed to know details about his deals that he'd never shared publicly. The way she touched his arm possessively, like she already owned him. Monica pulled out her phone and scrolled through the photos her private investigator had sent over the past weeks. There, Vanessa entering the federal building downtown 3 days ago. Another shot of her meeting with someone in a dark sedan outside Richard's office. A third showing her leaving a building Monica recognized as housing several government agencies. Her blood turned to ice. James, she interrupted his explanation about asset seizures. What does Vanessa Chin do for work? Richard's consultant? I'm not sure. Why? Because I don't think she's just sleeping with my husband for fun. I think she's sleeping with him for information. The line went quiet except for James's sharp intake of breath. Monica, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that Richard isn't the mastermind behind whatever illegal activity is happening. I think he's being set up by someone who's been sharing his bed and stealing his secrets. Through the window, she watched Vanessa excuse herself from a conversation with Miami's mayor, her movements graceful but purposeful. Monica had spent enough time in Richard's business world to recognize the difference between genuine charm and calculated manipulation. Every gesture, every smile, every touch seemed designed to extract maximum information with minimum suspicion. Monica remembered the night she'd followed Richard to one of his late meetings, expecting to catch him in a romantic dinner with his mistress. Instead, she'd watched through restaurant windows as Vanessa pulled documents from her purse, pointing to specific sections while Richard signed papers without reading them thoroughly. At the time, she'd assumed they were hotel contracts. Now she wondered what he'd really been signing. The timing is too perfect, she said to James. She appears in Richard's life right when the FBI starts investigating. She gains access to his business dealings, his personal information, his trust. This isn't a love affair, James. This is corporate espionage. But why would she? Because someone is paying her more than Richard ever could. Someone who wants to destroy him and take everything he's built. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Richard hadn't just betrayed their marriage. He'd betrayed himself, handed over their entire future to a woman who was playing him like a violin. The passionate affair he thought he was having was actually his own professional execution. Monica felt something she hadn't experienced in months, protective fury. Not for herself, but for the man who'd once loved her enough to risk everything on their shared dreams. The man who was too trusting, too hungry for affection, too human to see the trap closing around him. Have you ever realized someone close to you had ulterior motives? How did you handle that betrayal? Monica's private investigator had been tracking Vanessa for weeks. The photo he just sent to her phone showed Vanessa entering the FBI building 3 days ago, and Monica realized her marriage wasn't the only thing under attack. Sometimes the truth hits you like lightning, but this time, Monica held the storm in her hands. Monica's private investigator had done his job too well. The photos on her phone told a story that made her sick to her stomach. Vanessa entering government buildings. Vanessa meeting with men in expensive suits who looked nothing like hotel investors. Vanessa photographing documents from Richard's home office while he slept. But the final image stopped her cold. Vanessa shaking hands with Marcus Webb, Richard's business partner and supposed friend, outside a coffee shop 2 blocks from their office building. The timestamp showed last Tuesday, the same day Marcus had acted so concerned about Richard's behavior at their board meeting. "You son of a..." Monica caught herself before the words escaped. Around her, Miami's elite continued their champagne conversations, completely unaware that one of their own was about to lose everything. She scrolled through more photos. Marcus and Vanessa at lunch. Marcus handing Vanessa an envelope outside a parking garage. Marcus and Vanessa entering the same downtown hotel where Richard thought he was having secret meetings with his mistress. The betrayal was deeper than adultery. This was business murder, planned and executed by the two people Richard trusted most. Monica remembered the board meeting 3 weeks ago when Marcus had pushed Richard to sign the Miami Beach contracts faster, claiming they were losing money every day they delayed. She'd been there taking notes, watching Richard's face as he struggled with the decision. Marcus had been so insistent, so convincing. Now she understood why. Her phone buzzed with another call from James. "Monica, where are you? I need to speak with Richard immediately." "Still at the party." "James, I need you to check something for me. How long has Marcus been pushing for the Miami project?" "Marcus? He's been Richard's biggest supporter on it." "What?" Monica's eyes found Marcus across the ballroom, deep in conversation with the mayor's wife, his laugh too loud and his smile too wide. "Because I think our problems are a lot closer to home than we realized." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about someone who's been playing both sides of this game. Someone who knew exactly what buttons to push to get Richard to make bad decisions. Someone who had access to everything. Our finances, our plans, our weaknesses." Through the ballroom windows, she watched Vanessa return from the ladies' room, her red dress catching the light like a warning signal. The woman moved with the confidence of someone who knew she held all the cards. But Monica had been counting cards too. "James, I need you to freeze Marcus's access to company accounts. Tonight. Right now." "Monica, I can't just." "Yes, you can. As Richard's wife, I have power of attorney when he's unavailable. Use it." She hung up before he could argue, her mind racing through the implications. Marcus had been stealing from Richard's company to set up the illegal deals. Vanessa had been stealing from Richard's heart to gather evidence of those same deals. Together, they created the perfect storm to destroy everything Richard had worked for. But they'd made one mistake. They'd underestimated his wife. Have you ever discovered someone close to you is playing a completely different game? Tell me how it felt in the comments. Monica walked back toward the ballroom, her grandmother's pearls cool against her throat and her husband's future hanging in the balance. She had 15 minutes to save a man who'd spent months breaking her heart. When you discover the depth of betrayal, you have two choices: crumble or become dangerous. Monica chose dangereux. The ballroom felt different now, like a battlefield dressed up in silk and diamonds. Monica moved through the crowd with new purpose, every conversation and laugh around her fading into background noise. She had information that could save Richard or destroy him completely, depending on how she played the next few minutes. Richard stood near the auction display, his arm casually draped around Vanessa's waist as they examined a donated painting. To everyone watching, they looked like the perfect couple, powerful, attractive, completely absorbed in each other. Monica had looked at them the same way just hours ago, with hurt and jealousy burning in her chest. Now she looked at them with the eyes of someone who understood the game. "Richard," she said, approaching them with a smile that felt like putting on armor. "Could I speak with you privately?" He turned to her, with annoyance flickering across his features. "Monica, we're in the middle of. It's about the Miami project." The words hit him like a slap. His face went white, and Vanessa's grip on his arm tightened almost invisibly. "What about it?" Vanessa asked, her voice honey-sweet, but her eyes sharp as broken glass. Monica ignored her completely, focusing on Richard. "James called. There are some issues we need to discuss." "Now." Richard glanced around the room, clearly weighing his options. Monica knew he was thinking about appearances, about what people would say if he abandoned his mistress to talk with his wife. But she also knew him well enough to recognize when business concerns outweighed everything else. "Fine," he said. 5 minutes. They walked toward a quiet corner of the ballroom, past couples dancing to music that sounded like a funeral march in Monica's ears. She could feel Vanessa's eyes following them, could practically hear the woman's mind calculating how to handle this unexpected development. "What's going on?" Richard demanded once they were out of earshot. "James has been calling me all night, but I've been busy." "I know." Monica kept her voice level professional. Richard, the FBI is opening an investigation into the Miami Beach development. Tomorrow morning, they're freezing our assets. The color drained from his face completely. That's impossible. Everything we did was legal. Was it? Monica pulled out her phone, showing him the photos her investigator had taken. Because these pictures tell a different story. Richard stared at the images of Vanessa entering government buildings, meeting with officials, photographing documents. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I don't understand, he whispered. She's been helping me with the project. She said she had connections that could speed things up. She does have connections. With the FBI. Richard, she's not your consultant or your lover. She's your executioner. Monica watched her husband's world collapse in real time. The confident businessman who'd humiliated her minutes earlier became a confused, frightened man who finally realized he'd been played by an expert. But he looked back toward where Vanessa waited, still beautiful, still smiling, still deadly. She loves me. She loves what you can give her. Information, access, evidence to destroy you. Monica's voice, gentle despite everything he'd put her through. Richard, she's working with Marcus. Marcus? The name came out like a curse. That's ridiculous. Marcus is my business partner. He's my friend. Monica showed him the photos of Marcus and Vanessa together, watched as recognition and horror dawned in his eyes. 20 years of friendship, of trust, of building an empire together, all of it crumbling in the space of a heartbeat. Have you ever realized that everyone you trusted was lying to you? How did you survive that moment? Richard staggered backward, his face gray with shock and betrayal. Across the room, Vanessa and Marcus were watching them intently, and Monica realized they were out of time. In that moment, Monica had to decide, save the man who broke her heart, or let him face the consequences of his choices alone. They're watching us, Monica said quietly, her eyes locked on Richard's face as he processed the magnitude of his situation. Vanessa and Marcus. They know something's wrong. Richard looked like a man who'd just discovered he'd been living in a house made of cards during a hurricane. His hands shook as he gripped his phone, probably calculating how much money he could access, how quickly he could disappear. "What do I do?" he whispered, and for a moment he sounded like the scared young man she'd married. The one who'd built his first hotel with nothing but determination and her unwavering belief in him. Monica felt the weight of 20 years pressing down on her shoulders. 20 years of marriage, of building a life together, of dreams shared and promises made. He'd betrayed her tonight in the most public way possible, chosen another woman over her in front of everyone who mattered in their world. She could walk away right now. Let him face the FBI investigation alone. Let him discover just how empty his accounts would be once Marcus finished cleaning them out. Let him learn that the woman he'd been sleeping with had been recording their conversations and photographing their most intimate moments for evidence. It would be justice in a way. Perfect, poetic justice. But as she looked at his face, really looked at it, she saw something that stopped her cold. Fear, yes. Panic, absolutely. But underneath it all, she saw the ghost of the man who'd held her hand during her mother's funeral, who'd stayed up all night when she had food poisoning, who'd cried when the doctors said they might never have children. That man hadn't deserved this betrayal, even if the man he'd become had earned it. "We're going to fix this," she heard herself say, the words surprising her as much as they clearly surprised him. Richard's voice cracked. "Monica, after tonight, after everything I've put you through, after tonight, you're going to owe me more than you could ever repay," she said firmly. "But right now, we have bigger problems than your midlife crisis." She pulled out her phone and started typing rapidly. "James has already frozen Marcus's accounts. Now I need to get ahead of the FBI investigation." Ow! Monica's mind raced through possibilities, calling on years of watching Richard navigate business crises. We give them exactly what they want. We hand them Marcus and Vanessa on a silver platter, complete with evidence of their scheme to destroy you. But if I cooperate with the investigation, if you cooperate, you might survive this. If you don't, you'll definitely lose everything. Monica's voice hardened. "And so will I. My name is on half these accounts, Richard. My signature is on company documents. When you go down, you're taking me with you." The reality of what he'd done to her, not just the affair, but the business decisions that put her future at risk, seemed to hit him like a physical blow. Monica, I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to get hurt by the business side of things. The affair, that was about me being stupid and selfish. But the business problems, I thought I was protecting you by keeping you out of it. By keeping me out of it, you made it impossible for me to protect myself. Monica looked across the room where Vanessa and Marcus were having an intense, whispered conversation. But it's not too late to fix this. We just have to be smarter than they are. What would you do if your spouse's betrayal put your entire future at risk? Fight together or face it alone? Monica pulled Richard toward the exit, her mind already 3 steps ahead. They had until morning to build a case that would save their empire and send their betrayers to prison. But first, she had to make sure her husband understood the price of her help. Some partnerships are built on love, others on necessity, but the strongest ones are forged in the fire of mutual survival. The ride home from the gala took place in complete silence, the city lights blurring past their limousine windows like fallen stars. Monica sat as far from Richard as the seat allowed, her mind cataloging everything they needed to do in the next 6 hours before the FBI came knocking. Richard stared at his hands, occasionally glancing at her, with an expression she couldn't quite read. Guilt, definitely. Fear, absolutely. But something else too? Maybe respect for the woman he'd forgotten he'd married. Monica, he finally said as they pulled into their building's parking garage. Why are you helping me? After what I did tonight, what I've been doing for months. Why aren't you letting me burn? She turned to look at him fully for the first time since leaving the ballroom. His face was drawn, making him look older than his 52 years. The confident businessman who'd publicly humiliated her had disappeared, replaced by someone who looked lost and breakable. Because 20 years ago, you were worth saving, she said quietly. And I need to find out if any of that man still exists. They rode the elevator to their penthouse in silence, but it felt different now, charged with purpose instead of empty with resentment. Monica kicked off her heels the moment they walked through the door, her grandmother's pearls catching light as she moved toward Richard's home office. Show me everything, she said, settling behind his massive desk. Every document Marcus had access to. Every contract Vanessa helped you with. Every meeting, every decision, every signature from the past 6 months. Richard hesitated in the doorway, watching his wife take command of his business crisis with the same efficiency she'd once used to plan their dinner parties. Monica, some of this it's not going to be easy to hear. Richard, I've spent the last 3 months knowing you were sleeping with another woman. I've watched you fall in love with someone else right in front of me. I've sat through dinner parties where people whispered about your affair behind my back. Monica's fingers flew over his computer keyboard, pulling up files and spreadsheets. Trust me, there's nothing in these documents that could hurt me more than what I've already survived. He moved to the chair across from his desk, the same chair where Vanessa had probably sat while photographing confidential information. The Miami Beach project started 8 months ago. Marcus brought me the opportunity, said he had connections who could fast-track the environmental permits. For a price. For a price, Richard confirmed. But he made it sound like standard business expenses. Consulting fees, expediting charges, the usual costs of doing business in Miami. Monica pulled up the financial records, her eyes scanning columns of numbers that told a real story. These aren't consulting fees, Richard. These are bribes. And they're not going to city officials. They're going into offshore accounts controlled by Marcus. Richard leaned forward, studying the screen. That's impossible. I signed every check myself. You signed checks made out to legitimate-sounding companies. But look at the incorporation papers for those companies. They're all shells, all controlled by the same person. Monica clicked through several documents, highlighting the connections. Marcus has been stealing from you while setting you up to take the fall for his crimes. The magnitude of the betrayal was staggering. Richard's best friend and business partner had been systematically destroying him while positioning himself to take over everything they'd built together. And Vanessa? Monica pulled up another set of files. Copies of documents that should have been confidential, photographs of contracts taken in their own home, recordings of phone conversations Richard thought were private. Vanessa was gathering evidence to hand to the FBI. Everything they need to prosecute you for money laundering, bribery, and fraud. But here's what they don't know. We have evidence of their conspiracy too. For the first time since the confrontation, Richard smiled. It was a cold, calculating smile that reminded Monica of why he'd been so successful in business. What kind of evidence? Have you ever had to team up with someone who hurt you to fight a common enemy? How did that change your relationship? Monica leaned back in the chair, her eyes meeting her husband's across the desk that had witnessed so many of their arguments. The kind that's going to send them both to prison while we rebuild everything they tried to destroy. Victory requires sacrifice, but Monica was about to teach everyone involved exactly what she was willing to give up and what she would never surrender. At 3 a.m, their dining room table looked like a war room. Documents spread across the mahogany surface, laptops glowing with financial records, and 2 phones connecting them to lawyers, accountants, and federal agents who'd been dragged out of bed for an emergency. Monica had changed from her thrift store dress into jeans and one of Richard's old shirts, armor for the battle ahead. Richard sat across from her, looking more like the man she'd married than he had in years, focused and determined instead of distracted and guilty. James has everything ready on his end, Monica said, hanging up from their lawyer. The FBI will be here at 8 a.m., but they'll be expecting cooperation, not resistance. And Marcus? Marcus thinks he's untouchable. His accounts are frozen, but he doesn't know that yet. He'll probably try to access them first thing Monday morning and discover his perfect plan has a Monica-shaped hole in it. Richard almost smiled at that. What about Vanessa? Monica's expression hardened. Vanessa is about to learn that seducing married men requires more skill than she possesses. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a video file. While she was busy photographing your documents and recording your conversations, I was doing some recording of my own. The video showed Vanessa in their bedroom, going through Richard's personal safe while he showered. Another clip captured her photographing financial documents in his office. A third showed her meeting with Marcus outside their building, clearly discussing their progress. How did you? I hired security consultants 3 months ago when I suspected the affair. I told them I was worried about corporate espionage. Monica's smile was sharp as a blade. Turns out I was more right than I knew. Richard stared at the evidence that would destroy the woman he'd thought he loved. She's going to prison. She's going to prison for a very long time. Conspiracy, fraud, industrial espionage, blackmail. The federal prosecutor will have enough charges to keep her locked up until she's too old to seduce anyone. They worked through the night, building their case with the thoroughness that had once made them unstoppable business partners. As dawn approached, Monica felt something she hadn't experienced in months. The thrill of working alongside someone who matched her intelligence and determination. Monica, Richard said as they organized the final documents. After this is over, after we've dealt with the FBI and the legal proceedings, what happens to us? She looked up from the papers, studying his face in the morning light filtering through their windows. He looked older, worn down by guilt and betrayal, but there was something else there too. Hope, maybe, or at least the possibility of redemption. I don't know, she said honestly. You broke something in me, Richard. Something that might not be fixable. I know. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to earn your forgiveness, even if I never deserve it. Forgiveness and trust are 2 different things. I might be able to forgive you eventually, but trusting you again, loving you the way I used to. Monica shook her head. That person is gone, Richard. You killed her the first time you touched another woman. The words hit him like physical blows, but he didn't flinch away from them. Then who are you now? Monica gathered the evidence that would save their empire and destroy their enemies, feeling the weight of her new identity settling around her shoulders like a crown. I'm the woman who's going to make sure you never forget the price of betrayal, she said. And I'm the woman who's going to make sure Marcus and Vanessa pay an even higher price for underestimating me. What would you sacrifice to protect everything you've built? Share your thoughts below. The doorbell rang at exactly 8 a.m., and Monica smoothed her hair before going to meet the FBI agents who would decide their fate. Behind her, Richard straightened his tie and prepared to face the consequences of trusting the wrong people. But this time, he wouldn't face them alone. When federal agents knock on your door at dawn, you learn who you really are in the space between heartbeats. Special Agent Sarah Chun stood in their doorway like justice, wearing a tailored suit and sensible shoes. Behind her, 3 other agents waited with briefcases full of warrants and questions that could end lives. Monica noticed immediately that Agent Chun shared a last name with Vanessa, a coincidence that felt more like destiny. Mr. and Mrs. Hale, we need to discuss some irregularities in your business dealings, Agent Chun said, her voice carrying the weight of federal authority. May we come in? Monica stepped aside, gesturing toward their living room where she and Richard had spent countless evenings planning their future. Now they were about to plan their survival. We've been expecting you, Monica said, earning a sharp look from Agent Chun. My husband's lawyer informed us about the investigation last night. Richard remained silent, following Monica's earlier instructions to let her handle the initial conversation. He looked like a man walking to his own execution, which wasn't far from the truth. Agent Chun settled into their white leather sofa, pulling out a recording device and legal pad. Mr. Hale, we have evidence suggesting you've been involved in money laundering through your Miami Beach development project. Specifically, we believe you've been accepting payments from questionable sources and using your hotels to clean that money. That's not accurate, Monica said before Richard could respond. My husband has been the victim of a carefully planned conspiracy involving his business partner Marcus Webb and a woman named Vanessa Chun, who I believe might be related to you, Agent Chun. The agent's pen stopped moving across her pad. What kind of relationship are you suggesting? Monica had done her research during the long night. Vanessa Chun is your younger sister. She's been working undercover, but not for the FBI. She's been working for herself and Marcus Webb, gathering evidence to frame my husband while they steal his company. The silence in the room stretched like a wire about to snap. Agent Chin's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something that looked like surprise mixed with anger. Mrs. Hale, that's a very serious accusation. It's a very serious crime. Monica reached for the stack of evidence they'd prepared. We have video surveillance of your sister photographing confidential documents in our home. We have financial records showing that Marcus Webb created shell companies to steal money while making it appear that Richard was paying bribes. And we have recorded conversations between Marcus and Vanessa planning my husband's destruction. Agent Chin's colleagues exchanged glances that suggested this case had just become far more complicated than they'd expected. Monica could see them mentally rewriting their investigation, turning victims into suspects and suspects into victims. Mr. Hale, another agent said, are you claiming you had no knowledge of the illegal activities? Richard finally spoke, his voice steady despite the storm raging around him. I signed documents that Marcus told me were legitimate business expenses. I trusted him completely. We've been partners for 20 years. And I trusted Vanessa when she said she could help expedite the permit process. I never knew they were working together to destroy me. Monica watched Agent Chin's face as she processed this information. The woman was clearly struggling between professional duty and family loyalty. Exactly the position Monica had hoped to put her in. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was playing both sides? How did you handle that betrayal? Agent Chin closed her notepad with a snap that sounded like a judge's gavel. We're going to need to see all of your evidence. And we're going to need to have a very serious conversation with Marcus Webb and my sister. Nothing destroys a friendship faster than federal agents with handcuffs and 20 years of evidence. Marcus Webb's corner office overlooked Miami's skyline like a throne room built for a king. He sat behind his mahogany desk at 9 a.m. Monday morning, probably calculating how much money he'd stolen and how soon he could disappear to a country without extradition treaties. He never saw the FBI coming. Monica watched the arrest from the parking garage across the street, using binoculars to see Marcus's face when Agent Chun and her team walked into his office. Even from 4 stories away, she could see the exact moment he realized his perfect crime had fallen apart. His mouth opened in what was probably a scream of rage or denial. His hands flew to his computer keyboard, desperately trying to delete files that would never help him now. The agents moved with practiced efficiency, seizing his computers, his phones, his financial records, everything he thought he'd hidden. Richard stood beside her, watching his former best friend get handcuffed through the office windows. 20 years, he said quietly. 20 years of friendship, of building something together. How long do you think he was planning this? Monica lowered the binoculars, considering the question. I think he started planning it the moment your company became worth more than his share of it. Some people can't handle other people's success, even when they helped create it. They watched as Marcus was led from the building in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled and his face red with fury. Reporters had somehow gotten wind of the arrest, probably from law enforcement contacts, and camera flashes lit up the morning like lightning. Monica's phone buzzed with a text from Agent Chun. Webb is talking. He's trying to pin everything on your husband and my sister. We need you both at the federal building in an hour. He's not going to go down quietly, Monica said, showing Richard the message. He's going to try to make you look like the mastermind and Vanessa look like an innocent victim who got caught in the middle. Richard's jaw tightened. Let him try. We have evidence that proves otherwise. They drove to the federal building in silence, both lost in thoughts about friendship, betrayal, and the price of misplaced trust. Monica found herself thinking about the early days when she, Richard, and Marcus had worked 18-hour days to get their first hotel off the ground. She'd made dinner for all three of them countless nights, listening to their dreams and plans for the future. Now one of those dreamers was in federal custody, and the other was fighting to avoid joining him. The federal building buzzed with activity when they arrived. Agents hurried between offices carrying boxes of evidence, while prosecutors reviewed cases that could change lives forever. Monica felt like she was walking through the halls of justice itself. Cold, efficient, and absolutely unforgiving. Agent Shin met them in a conference room that smelled like coffee and broken dreams. Marcus Webb is claiming that Richard was the one who approached him about the illegal activities. He says Vanessa was trying to gather evidence to expose the crimes, not participate in them. Monica almost laughed. He's really going to try that? After all the evidence we've provided? He's desperate, Agent Shin said. Desperate people say desperate things. But we have your recordings, your financial evidence, and now we have his own financial records showing exactly how he's been stealing from your company. Richard leaned forward across the table. What about the charges against me? Agent Shin consulted her notes. Based on the evidence you provided, we believe you were a victim of fraud rather than a participant in it. However, the prosecutors will want your full cooperation in building cases against Webb and my sister. Monica felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Relief. Not just for Richard's legal situation, but for the validation that her instincts had been right. She'd recognized the trap before it could destroy them completely. What would you do if someone you considered family tried to destroy everything you'd built? Tell me in the comments. Agent Chin's radio crackled with an urgent message. We have Vanessa Chun in custody, but she's requesting to make a deal. She claims she has information about other victims of Marcus Webb's schemes. Even cornered rats can bite, and Vanessa Chun was about to prove she had teeth sharper than anyone expected. The federal holding facility smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Monica followed Agent Chun through corridors lined with holding cells, each one containing someone whose choices had led them to this moment. Soon they'd reach the cell holding the woman who tried to steal her husband and destroy her life. Vanessa sat in interview room 3 wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with her perfectly styled hair. Even in federal custody, she maintained the poise that had made her so effective at seduction and deception. But Monica could see cracks in the facade, dark circles under her eyes, chipped nail polish, the slight tremor in her hands. Mrs. Hale, Vanessa said when Monica entered with Agent Chun and Richard. I suppose you think you've won. I think justice is being served, Monica replied, settling into the chair across from the woman who'd shared her husband's bed while plotting his destruction. But I hear you think you have something to bargain with. Vanessa's eyes flicked between Monica and Agent Chun, sister to sister, enemy to enemy. Marcus Webb has been running this kind of operation for years. Richard isn't his first victim. This is his most recent one. I have names, dates, financial records, companies he's destroyed, lives he's ruined. Agent Chun leaned forward. Why should we believe anything you say now? You've been lying for months. Because I kept insurance, Vanessa said with a smile that reminded Monica of a snake's warning display. I recorded every conversation with Marcus. I photographed every document he showed me. I copied every file he thought was secure. Monica felt her blood run cold. This woman had been playing a deeper game than anyone realized. I wasn't just gathering evidence against Richard, Vanessa continued. I was gathering evidence against Marcus too. You see, I never trusted him. Men who betray their best friends will betray anyone. Richard spoke for the first time since entering the room. So, this was all just business to you? The affair, the seduction, making me fall in love with you. It was all just part of some elaborate con. Vanessa's mask slipped completely, revealing something ugly underneath. Love? You think this was about love? Richard, you're a middle-aged man having a crisis. I'm a young woman who needed access to your company's financial records. It was never personal. The words hit Richard like physical blows, but Monica felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Every romantic moment he'd shared with this woman, every intimate conversation, every promise whispered in the dark, all of it had been calculated manipulation. What do you want in exchange for the information about Marcus's other victims? Agent Chen asked, clearly struggling with the professional need to make deals with criminals and the personal desire to see her sister pay for her crimes. Reduced charges. Instead of conspiracy and fraud, I'll plead to cooperation with federal investigators. Minimal prison time, probation, maybe community service. Monica stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. Absolutely not. She tried to destroy my marriage and my husband's company. She doesn't get to walk away because she kept better records than her partner. Mrs. Hale, Agent Chun said carefully, if her information can help us prosecute other cases, save other victims, then use the information, but don't let her profit from it. She made her choices. Let her live with the consequences. Vanessa's composed facade cracked completely. You self-righteous witch. You think you're so much better than me because you married rich instead of working for it. Monica leaned across the table until she was inches from Vanessa's face. I think I'm better than you because when my husband betrayed me, I chose to save him instead of destroying him. When I had evidence that could ruin lives, I used it to seek justice instead of revenge. You're not a victim, Vanessa. You're a predator who got caught. Have you ever confronted someone who tried to destroy everything you cared about? How'd it feel to look them in the eye? Vanessa sat back in her chair, her last card played and losing. Agent Shin closed her notebook with the sound of a cell door slamming shut. Justice comes in many forms, but satisfaction only comes when you realize you've become stronger than the people who try to break you. 6 months later, Monica stood in the same federal courthouse where Marcus Webb had been sentenced to 15 years in prison for fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. Vanessa Chun had received 8 years. Not the minimal sentence she'd bargained for, but enough to ensure she'd think twice before seducing her next victim. The courtroom was nearly empty for the final hearing. Just lawyers, a few reporters, and the people whose lives had been forever changed by greed and betrayal. Monica wore a black suit that made her feel powerful and untouchable, like armor forged from everything she'd survived. Richard sat beside her, looking older but somehow more solid than he had in years. The investigation had cleared him of criminal charges, but the scandal had cost them millions in business deals and public reputation. Half their hotels have been sold to pay legal fees and settle civil lawsuits for Marcus's other victims. The court finds that Richard Hale was indeed a victim of fraud rather than a participant, Judge Martinez said from the bench. All remaining charges against Mr. Hale are hereby dismissed. Monica felt Richard's hand squeeze hers, the first time he'd touched her in months. She didn't pull away, but she didn't squeeze back either. Some bridges, once burned, could never be completely rebuilt. Outside the courthouse, Reporters waited with cameras and questions about the future of Hale Enterprises, about their marriage, about whether justice had truly been served. Monica faced them with the confidence of someone who'd learned that survival was the best revenge. "Mrs. Hale, what's next for you and your husband?" a reporter called out. Monica looked at Richard, then back at the cameras. "We're rebuilding. Stronger this time, wiser this time, and with much better security measures." "Are you staying married?" The question everyone wanted answered. Monica had been asking herself the same thing for months, through long nights of lawyers and federal agents, through the pain of reliving every detail of Richard's affair in court testimony. "That's private," she said simply, but her tone suggested the answer was more complicated than yes or no. They drove home in Richard's new car, a modest sedan instead of the flashy sports car he'd sold to pay legal bills. Their penthouse was smaller now, too, half the size of their previous home, but somehow feeling more honest. "Monica," Richard said as they pulled into their building's parking garage, "I know I have no right to ask this, but I need to know, is there any chance you could forgive me? Not just for the legal cooperation, but really forgive me." Monica stared at the concrete wall in front of them, thinking about the woman she'd been 6 months ago and the woman she'd become. The scared wife who'd worn a thrift store dress to feel worthy was gone. In her place was someone harder, smarter, more cautious, but also more powerful. "I already have forgiven you," she said quietly. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean trusting you with my heart again. And it doesn't mean pretending that what you did didn't change me forever." Richard's face fell, but he nodded like a man accepting a sentence. "I understand. I hope that someday you might be able to love me again." Monica turned to look at him fully. This man who'd shared her bed for 20 years, who'd built an empire with her, who'd nearly destroyed everything they'd created together. What do you do when someone breaks your heart but proves they're worth saving? Share your thoughts below. "I don't know if that woman exists anymore," Monica said, "but maybe the woman I'm now is someone you could learn to love instead." Sometimes the end of one story is really the beginning of another, and sometimes the strongest foundations are built on the ruins of what came before. 1 year after the gala that changed everything, Monica stood in the ballroom of their newest hotel, smaller than their previous properties but designed with care instead of arrogance. The Miami Beach project had been sold to pay legal fees, but they'd used the remaining money to buy a boutique hotel in Key West that needed renovation and fresh vision. Tonight was their grand reopening, but more importantly, it was Monica's debut as CEO of the newly restructured Hale Enterprises. She'd insisted on the title change as part of their business rebuild. No more silent partnerships, no more trusting other people to handle what she could handle herself. Richard worked as her business partner now instead of her boss. The dynamic had shifted completely, and surprisingly, he seemed to thrive under her leadership. Without the pressure of being the sole decision-maker, he'd rediscovered the creativity that had made him successful in the first place. Mrs. Hale, their new head of security, approached with the evening's final report. "Everything looks good. No uninvited guests, no suspicious activity, no federal agents at the door." Monica smiled at the joke. James Morrison had suggested hiring former FBI agents for their security team. People who understood exactly what kind of threats could destroy a business from the inside. "Thank you, David. Make sure the staff knows they did excellent work tonight." She watched their guests, smaller crowd than the Miami galas, but genuine people who'd supported them through the scandal instead of disappearing when things got difficult. Local business owners, hotel industry friends who'd stood by them, employees who'd chosen loyalty over fear. Richard approached carrying 2 glasses of champagne, offering her one with the tentative smile of someone still earning back privileges. The food critic from the Miami Herald seems impressed. "She's already asking about her next property." "One hotel at a time," Monica said, accepting the champagne but maintaining the professional distance that had become natural between them. "We build slowly now, carefully now." Their marriage existed in a strange space between business partnership and something that might eventually become love again. They lived in the same house, but slept in separate bedrooms. They worked together daily, but rarely touched. They were rebuilding trust the same way they were rebuilding their business, one careful decision at a time. Monica, Richard said quietly, I know this is probably not the right time to ask, but I was wondering if you'd consider having dinner with me. Not a business dinner, not a publicity event. Just dinner, like we used to. Monica studied his face, looking for signs of the arrogance that had nearly destroyed them both. Instead, she saw something that looked like hope mixed with genuine uncertainty. The man standing before her bore little resemblance to the one who'd publicly humiliated her a year ago. I'll think about it, she said, which was more encouragement than she'd given him in months. As the evening wound down, Monica stepped onto the hotel's waterfront terrace, breathing in salt air and the satisfaction of a job well done. Their first event as a rebuilt company had been a success. Their legal troubles were behind them. Their former enemies were in prison where they belonged. But more importantly, she discovered something about herself that she'd never known before. She was stronger than she'd ever imagined, smarter than she'd ever been given credit for, and more capable of surviving betrayal than anyone, including herself, had expected. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. For a moment, her blood ran cold. Too many months of federal investigations and legal threats had left her jumpy about unexpected communications. But this message was different. Mrs. Hale, my name is Jennifer Watson. My husband was one of Marcus Webb's earlier victims. I read about your case in the news and wondered if you might have advice for someone trying to rebuild after betrayal. If you're willing to help, I'd be grateful for any wisdom you could share. Monica smiled, realizing that her story wasn't ending. It was evolving into something larger. She'd survived her own betrayal and helped put the people responsible in prison. Now, maybe she could help other people survive theirs. Have you ever realized that your worst experience could become your greatest strength? What would you do with that power? She began typing her response, offering to meet with Jennifer next week. Sometimes the most beautiful endings were really new beginnings in disguise, and Monica Hale was ready to write the next chapter of her life. Stronger, wiser, and absolutely unbreakable.